No, I was told to tune it back a little bit when I was having 8 or 9 cups a day.
Oh, yes, that's a lot. Oh, you would have been permanently wired.
Well, it didn't seem to be.
Okay.
But, you know, the function of age, then I started getting a little older and falling down the wrong side of 40, and then I didn't sleep so well, whereas I used to sleep like a baby. So less coffee and certainly less alcohol makes you sleep better.
Yes. Good health tips from Chris Wikata. An interesting point, especially with you on Victoria, no offence, Chris, an interesting point made on the Digital Trends website. They say data is the new oil, so why are we giving it away? Everything they know about us online, as Megan was talking about prior to 4 o'clock, is worth billions of dollars. Apparently, even a money-losing company with enough data about its users can be worth well into the 8 figures. Something as simple as clicking links on Google to help it learn which websites are more important than others. And we all do that. So in exchange for ostensibly free services, we're all training new technologies which one day may put large numbers of us out of work. Do you agree with all this? Do you agree there should be micropayments for what we are doing for them?
Look, I don't. And as you've noted there, Jim, we forget that we moan about these services, we moan about the collection of data, we moan about the advertisements. But, you know, Facebook, all of these services we love and use all the time, it's free. If you don't like the free service, don't use it. And in terms of the cost of making these micropayments, generally how they're using this data is they are aggregating it, and the cost of making micropayments to thousands, if not millions, of end users would just be an absolute nightmare. So I just don't see it working.
Oh, Jaron Lanier, who wrote the book Who Owns the Future and is well known for his virtual reality work, he's suggesting this, actually, every time our data is used to earn a company money. I know you say it's free, but that's in inverted commas, isn't it, according to this argument? Because it's free, but in fact they find it very useful and monetize it to quite a great degree, Victoria.
Oh, look, that's absolutely true. I mean, the one thing I would say to all consumers is that it's really important, and, you know, we all do this. You get your app, you start using the website, you sign up to your account, and you can't be bothered reading the T's and C's. But they actually do, every country or most countries have pretty strong restrictions on use of your data. So if you want to know how they're going to use it and what they're going to use it for, you need to look in those terms and conditions. And if you're worried about this, it's really important that you check out how they use it. And actually the other thing I would say is that New Zealand companies, tech companies, apps and websites are actually really careful with how they use their data and take their customers' security and protection of data super seriously. So I think Kiwi companies are great when it comes to this, but international companies, who knows? The main thing is, if you're worried about it, have a look at the T's and C's, because that will set out the different ways that they can use your information.
You don't have a choice, though, do you, Chris, about using Facebook or Google? I mean, these are we're slaves to that machine.
You absolutely do have a choice. I've still got mates who are not on Facebook. I moan about it sometimes, but I'm on it a lot.
All right. Parking in Queenstown, hopeless, says someone. We live 2 hours away and visit a few times a year. The free parks and the gardens make that possible. Chris Wikata, always a pleasure. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Victoria Stewart has been on the panel as well. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. Hope it was a pleasure too.
It was a pleasure for both of you, and we look forward to both having you both on again. And Checkpoint with John Campbell now.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint we received leaked documents this afternoon. We have just received confirmation that Counties Manukau Health is looking at offering voluntary redundancies to certain people it employs, including clinicians. Is this more evidence of pressure on the health system? We investigate tonight. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters uses his first media conference to have a go at the media and to tell us to sit down, shut up and wait. Also tonight, controversy reignites over teaching Christianity in state schools. Outrage in a small Waikato community over mainland poultry's plans for intensive egg farming. And in Saudi Arabia, women can now get a driver's licence.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The New Zealand First Leader, Winston Peters, has lashed out at the media after meeting with his new caucus to discuss who he'll go into government with. This afternoon, he confirmed no decision will be made on a coalition partner until after the special votes are announced on October the 7th. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Winston Peters held a news conference this afternoon and spent most of it giving the media a feature-length air-bashing for their election coverage. But between insults, he did say he would stick with his October the 12th deadline of announcing who he'd do a deal with. Mr Peters says he and his colleagues today went through all the options and came up with 9 possible coalition scenarios. Labour's leader Jacinda Ardern says her team's going through its policies to see where there are areas in common with New Zealand First and the Green Party. The Greens today also held initial talks with their negotiating team as they prepare for the discussions. Atu i te whare pārimata, ko Chris Bramalaho.
The president of the Maori Women's Welfare League says a decision on whether to abolish the Maori seats isn't one the Pākehā majority should make. Prue Kapua criticised what she called the institutional racism of successive governments in her conference address today. She says a referendum on the Maori seats would be another example of such racism.
You know, a decision about whether we have Māori seats is not a decision for the Pākehā majority to make.
Prue Kapua of the Māori Women's Welfare League. Winston Peters' campaign on holding a referendum on the seats, and that's likely to feature in coalition negotiations. The police are looking for a man seen on security footage after a Housing New Zealand resident was found dead outside his apartment. The 69-year-old's body was found in the stairwell of a block of flats in the Auckland suburb of Western Springs late last night. The police say he lived alone and appears to have died after a vicious attack. CCTV images of a man with dyed blonde hair and a moustache have been released, and the police are appealing for anyone who knows him to come forward. Detective Inspector Scott Beard says they're still piecing together what happened.
We don't know the reason behind or the motive behind the killing. Or what police suggest is if people see that person, don't approach, but contact police and the police will take action from there.
Scott Beard says the police have spoken to the man's family and his body is due to be removed this afternoon. A fuel industry spokesman says jet fuel stocks at Auckland Airport are being replenished quickly, with more fuel arriving than is being used. The only fuel pipeline from the Marsden Point refinery to Auckland was out of action for 10 days after it ruptured nearly 2 weeks ago, forcing airlines to cut both domestic and international flights. The pipeline was repaired at the weekend. The spokesman, Andrew McNaught, says the airline uses between 3 and 4 million litres of jet fuel per day, and supply is looking healthy. Airline representative Justin Tai-Umbers says some long-haul flights will continue to refuel offshore to help supply, and airline fuel allocations, currently 80% of normal usage, will be reviewed next week. A pamphlet being given to parents by a group opposed to Christianity in schools is under fire. The Secular Education Network has been outside Christchurch's Wharenui school today, warning parents about religious lessons there and claiming they're more about recruiting new members than education. Its pamphlets show a picture of a little girl simulating choking herself. The group says this is an illustration of an exercise children are asked to do by those taking the classes as an example of what happens to non-believers. However, a pastor at the church providing the lessons, Phil Steadman, denies children have ever been asked to do this.
I have no idea what it's about, to be honest. We would never in our wildest dreams go anywhere near using a story like that. And I think that's just a misrepresentation completely for the sort of thing we would teach.
Phil Steadman says while he believes in hell, this is not something children are taught. A resident on Vanuatu's Ambai Island says the volcanic eruption has devastated the island. Most of the island's population has been relocated as the volcano continues to erupt, blanketing everything in ash. Edmund Hoke, a provincial representative and Ambai resident, says trees and crops have been devastated. 8,000 people are now crammed into evacuation centres where authorities say they're short of food, water and other material. Vessels have been sent from the capital Port Vila with supplies, but the disaster coordinator on the island says they're unlikely to be enough. Manuel Ure from the Penama provincial government says the centres are overcrowded and unsanitary. He says the last time the volcano erupted in 2005, people were in evacuation centres for months. It's 5:05. To sport, and Lydia Ko says a hometown advantage doesn't make her the tournament favourite for the New Zealand Women's Golf Open starting in Auckland tomorrow. The world number 8 is the top-ranked player in the field but hasn't won a tournament in 15 months. Ko says she'll be trying to channel good memories of her 3 previous New Zealand Open wins, but she doubts she'll have any particular advantage at the new Windross Farm course.
I was struggling the last few months, so it was nice to have those finishes, coming here. And if you start getting the top 10s and being in contention, those are the things that build your confidence and make the huge difference.
Lydia Ko. The Crusaders fullback David Havili is set to make his All Black debut in Sunday morning's test against Argentina in Buenos Aires. Havili was called into the squad after the season-ending injury to Geordie Barrett. Damien McKenzie has started all 4 tests in the Rugby Championship so far and is due a rest. Assistant coach Ian Foster is confident Havili can fill the fullback spot. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's Mappiness, or using people's mobile phones to determine happiness around the globe. Where it is, where it isn't. I speak to some of the brains behind it. Megan Whelan starts a new series of great ideas which may or may not affect our future. This evening, the future of leisure. And this week's overseas correspondent, Israel's Liat Collins, remembers when New Zealanders battled for the territory she now calls home, on nights from afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine, isolated showers in the east this afternoon. Bay of Plenty and Gisborne, periods of rain with some heavy falls about the ranges. Rain easing to a few showers in Bay of Plenty today, heavy inland in the afternoons. Hawke's Bay, scattered showers developing, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms about the ranges, clearing from the south tomorrow. For the remainder of the North Island, fine spells, scattered showers inland during the afternoons and evenings, some heavy and possible thunderstorms about the central and southern ranges this afternoon. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine spells, scattered showers inland during the afternoons and evenings, some heavy today with possible afternoon thunderstorms. Otago, Southland and Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated afternoon showers inland, high cloud increasing tomorrow. Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain tomorrow evening, and for the Chatham Islands, rain at times. It's coming up to 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Tonight on the programme, Winston Peters lays down the ground rules to the media. We talk to a Saudi women's rights activist about the long, hard battle to win the right to get a driver's licence, religion in state schools, and Lydia Ko is home for the New Zealand Women's Open. But we begin tonight with what appears to be more evidence of the growing financial pressures on the public health system. Checkpoint has this afternoon been leaked a letter signed by the CEO of Counties Manukau Health declaring it's about to offer some of its staff, including all clinicians, the opportunity for voluntary redundancy. It's the first time we've received internal documents from the Counties Manukau DHB, which operates Auckland's Middlemore Hospital. Over the past few weeks, we've looked at financial pressures on the Southern, Canterbury and Waikato DHBs, and we've reported on what we believe is a rapidly growing combined total deficit across all 20 district health boards in New Zealand. The letter we've received today describes a scheme which will offer some Counties Manukau Health staff an opportunity to request payment if they cease their employment. We went to Counties Manukau DHB requesting an interview. No one was available. But a short time ago, we received an emailed statement from Counties Manukau Health confirming that the DHB is, and I quote, looking at offering certain groups of employees the option to voluntarily end their employment. A DHB source has told Checkpoint this is sharply at odds with recent suggestions the hospital is struggling with too few staff. On the 25th of August, Middlemore Hospital posted a printed notice at the front of its emergency department saying, and I quote, the hospital is full. It was photographed by Green MP Julianne Genter, posted online, and after widespread social media circulation, the sign itself was removed. DHB sources have told Checkpoint there were days over winter when the hospital was under such immense pressure, staff wondered if they could cope. Checkpoint has also been told there's tension between hospital staff and DHB management, and the driving issue is money, budgets. In May, an email from the DHB's most senior managers warned of, quote, belt tightening. Hospital sources have told Checkpoint belts can't get any tighter. And now the letter sent by Counties Manukau CEO Gloria Johnson on Monday and obtained by Checkpoint today. It's headed Voluntary Cessation Scheme, and it says that voluntary cessation is available to some
staff on individual employment agreements and to those at the top of the band for their role, which includes all clinicians.
Its first paragraph also contains the sentence,
"The scheme offers these staff members an opportunity to request a payment if they cease their employment with Counties Manukau Health."
And on the second page, the letter states,
"One advantage of such a scheme is that it minimises the disruptive impact of restructuring processes."
Gloria Johnson says,
"Only a small group will be eligible."
But Checkpoint has spoken to staff at Middlemore who are surprised that any such offer is being made at all. The reason, they told us, can only be budgets. And there is no doubt that budgets in at least 2 Auckland DHBs are tight.
Yeah, it's very challenging times.
That was Lester Levy, the chairman of all 3 Auckland District Health Boards, including Counties Manukau, talking to Checkpoint last month. It was not an interview about these voluntary redundancies. The letter hadn't gone out then. But it was an interview about how difficult it's become for DHBs to meet their budgets. More and more difficult, he told us, because the most obvious efficiencies have already been achieved.
And this year is difficult and very challenging.
On the one hand, budgets, on the other hand, the core role of public hospitals. And between them, somewhere, the question,
how do you keep people safe? And how do you do that while you're trying to balance all these issues about productivity targets, financial targets, and the like? And it's quite a tough ask at the moment.
That's Lester Levy, who is the chair of all 3 Auckland DHBs, just confirming we now have official confirmation from the Counties Manukau DHB that voluntary employment cessation scheme is going to be offered to employees. We would really like to talk to someone from the Ministry of Health about this and the financial pressures on the DHB. The DHB itself has said, having declined an interview, in this statement, we are absolutely committed to delivering high quality health services for our community. Demand for our services is increasing, and the objective of this voluntary cessation scheme is to free resources from some parts of the organisation and redeploy them to our frontline services. The statement says it also provides flexibility for Counties Manukau Health to redeploy resources to the frontline without restructuring processes. All of this breaking late this afternoon. It's 30 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has held an insult-laden media conference this afternoon, lashing out at the media for our election coverage, but he did confirm his party would have a decision about any deal by October the 12th and that New Zealand First would consult its membership over the next 24 hours. Mr Peters says the negotiations won't start in earnest until the final result is announced on October 7th. But he may speak to Labour's Jacinda Ardern and National's Bill English before then. As our political editor Jane Patterson reports, Mr Peters was in no mood for questions upon his arrival in Wellington.
I'm here to talk to my colleague, all right?
Can you clarify the significance of specials in terms of the negotiating that might happen at that point?
You can ask all the questions you like, you're not going to get one answer right now.
Also arriving in Wellington was Shane Jones bearing gifts for his caucus.
Yes, this is Spirits Bay Kaimoana, crayfish. I don't know which is which. One is female and one is male.
Is one for Winston and one for Bill, or?
No, one's rations for the soldiers and the other is a tribute to Caesar.
A former Labour MP and Minister, Mr Jones is now a List MP for New Zealand First. One of the issues on the table for negotiations will be a referendum on the future of the Maori seats, as advocated by his new party. Mr Jones was asked for his view on the Maori seats, given he remains on the Maori roll and once stood in the Maori electorate of Tamaki Makaurau.
All discussions pertaining to the future of our Maori seats, which, as you know, I'm still a member of, that lies with Winston, the team, and the inevitable coalition discussions.
Who did you vote for in Te Tokoro?
That's between God and me.
He was also asked if he'd be seeking a ministerial position in any new government.
No, too early for such... too early and too treacherous for a response to such suggestions.
His New Zealand First colleague Tracy Martin says she does not expect real talks about forming a government to happen until after the special votes are counted on October the 7th. And she says no single party has a so-called moral mandate to form a government.
This is MMP, and I mean, and I think to put it in perspective, Germany's not expecting to get a government till Christmas. So, I don't think we're going to be here waiting till Christmas.
Meanwhile, the Labour leader Jacinda Ardern was out and about today at a school for teenage parents near Wellington, but she's still very much focused on the talks that will happen over the coming weeks.
What we'll be making sure when we go into those negotiations, we're taking them incredibly seriously, doing the preparatory work before we go in, but also leaving space for Mr Peters and also for the Green Party to do the work they need to do alongside their colleagues.
After a caucus meeting at Parliament this afternoon, Mr Peters called a media conference in the Beehive Theatrette.
We first of all forswore as a group of MPs to ensure that we didn't put our own personal views from the leader to the most newest member of caucus above the interests of the party and above the interests of the country. That's what I said on election night, and that's what we're going to do. I want to tell you that we're not going to be persuaded or dissuaded by any of the speculative drivel that's been written by some of you.
Then he turned his attention to the media.
And all I'm asking for is a bit of understanding, rather than the tripe that some people are putting out, malicious, malignant, and vicious in the extreme, of the nature which they were doing before the election without me being there, and now they continued it on. Well, why would you ask a question like that? I'm still asking you, I know you'd like to know the answer, but why on earth would you ask a question like that? It is a totally unreasonable question. Well, I'm asking you, why would we have the discussion, and you can't tell me? Look, the term bottom line was your phrase during the whole election. You kept it up day in, day out. It wasn't New Zealand First phrase. It's the kind of misrepresentation that one has to live with. But we survived, I tell you, we survived okay.
Throughout the course of the media conference, Mr Peters did confirm his party would stick to the deadline it signalled before the campaign, Thursday 12th of October, return of the writ. He said party members would be consulted over the next few days, but the Constitution does not require an endorsement from the membership once a deal has been struck. Mr Peters says his party does have certain positions that are non-negotiable, but would not say what they were or detail any policy priorities. He said he would not be holding another media conference until after special votes have been counted. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
18 minutes past 5, coming up on the programme. Should religious studies be taught in state schools? Opponents take to a Christchurch school with flyers. And health authorities investigate the prospect of opening a human breast milk bank in Auckland. We'd love your feedback tonight on anything we are covering. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, Checkpoint with John Campbell. Lots of you now getting our stories, particularly visual content through Facebook. And our email is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Right. If you're listening to this stuck in traffic, despairing of the hell that is a stationary car in so-called rush hour, consider that women in Saudi Arabia have only just won the right to do exactly that. On Tuesday night, Saudi time, King Salman issued a royal decree stating driver's licences can now be issued to women who want them, although some women may still be denied the right to drive by males in their family. But for women who've risked arrest, opprobrium, job losses, and even worse, campaigning for the right to drive, the King's decree is indeed a triumph. Among them is the fearless women's rights activist Tatuna Al-Fassi. An associate professor of women's history at King Saud University, Dr. Al-Fassi has spent her adult life campaigning for women to be allowed to vote, to drive, and to be less strictly controlled by the country's religious fundamentalists. Victories are hard won. And as Hatun Al-Fassi told me just 2 hours after the decree was issued, this is certainly one of those victories.
It is very exciting, of course. We are very excited. We have been, since 10 o'clock, which is like about two hours ago, we've been on the phone, on WhatsApp, on Twitter, on Facebook, on TV, on radio, exchanging, celebrating, and supporting each other. It's really great. We can't believe that we are living this day when our demands, like number one demand, the easiest supposedly, is at last realized. So we are very, very, really happy, excited. We're not thinking of anything else at the moment other than enjoying this moment. And thinking of all the sacrifices that Saudi women have went through until we came to this moment and this day.
I want to return to those sacrifices and the length and cost of your campaign to get the right to drive. But you had to win that right. This is very clear, isn't it? And so this is a collective triumph, isn't it?
Sure. Rights are not given. Our rights are not given. They have to be taken. And we believe that our demands, our struggle, our resistance, our continuous efforts, different ways, different methods, all of that has paid off now. It's not a struggle of one woman. It's a combined work, and not only women. There are also men who have stood by us and supported our demands and our rights.
But for the women, obviously, there was far greater personal risk and personal cost. Can you tell me about the campaign? You mentioned sacrifices before. Can you tell me about what those sacrifices were and how long the campaign was? When did the public campaigning begin?
Since 1990, Saudi women have went in demonstrations. They paid. They were arrested. They paid very tremendously from their jobs, from their education, their reputation, traveling. All of that was suspended in 1990. And after that, Saudi women continued. The struggle continued. The demands. Many were arrested. Many were imprisoned. Many were harassed. Many have lost their jobs. So it was a very disturbing struggle, because it was for what? For driving. It was supposed to be something very normal. To be, it's your right, but it took really 27 years until it was realized that it's a lot.
It's a long time.
We're very happy.
Yes, I can imagine. Hatun Al-Fassi, who's a women's rights campaigner, activist in Saudi Arabia. Pretty extraordinary woman. It's 23 and a half minutes past 5. Feedback coming in already on our the emails we've obtained today, the letters we've obtained today from Counties Manukau Health about voluntary employment cessation scheme being offered to some employees, including clinicians. This one from Margaret in Pōkeno, which is south of Auckland. I have had a recurrence of reflux problem with a lot of pain, and my GP decided we'd prudent to get an endoscopy so we would know what we were dealing with. Letter was sent to the Manukau Super Centre Clinic. After a few weeks, I this week rang to see if my appointment had been made, but no, not yet. The GP had said there would be a 3-month wait. This week I'm told that I have 19 weeks to wait. In other words, nearly 5 months. You've just read the redundancy offer by that DHB to clinicians. What the hell is going on with our health systems? Thank you for pursuing this on our behalf. I am managing it this time, but in 5 months, I just don't know yet. I feel badly for those people who have really serious health problems, as the waiting is the toughest part. We receive so much feedback along those lines every time we cover a DHB. Thank you. Controversy has reignited over the thorny issue of teaching Christianity in state schools, with opponents taking pleas for a ban to the school gate today. Campaigners from the Secular Education Network have been outside Christchurch's Wharenui school, handing out pamphlets warning parents about what they say is the sinister nature of what's being taught. But those conducting the classes say the pamphlets are just scaremongering and are spreading misinformation. So, Colin Young paid a visit to Wharenui school.
Opening the pamphlet being handed out by the Secular Education Network today, your eye is drawn straight away to a picture of a little girl simulating choking herself. Tanya Jacob says this is an illustration of an exercise children as young as 5 are asked to do, and a 5-year-old copy of the curriculum being used by church groups to teach religious education in schools.
That's what the kids are acting out in one of the lessons. So it's a farming parable, and it describes the children or the people who do not choose to follow Christianity. And so they are growing up and, they don't follow Christianity, so they choke and fall down to the floor.
Tanya Jacob said this sort of material belongs in church, not a state school.
I think that's teaching children contempt for the non-Christian children in their school as well. I think that's fairly horrendous. It's sort of saying, if you're not Christian, you're no good.
But a pastor at the church providing religious education at Wharenui School, Phil Steadman, denies children have ever been asked to simulate choking in order to demonstrate what happens to non-believers.
I have no idea what it's about, to be honest. We would never in our wildest dreams go anywhere near using a story like that. And I think that's just a misrepresentation completely for the sort of thing we would teach.
A church member who helps take the lessons, Christy Parry Jennings, says the curriculum was changed this year because of pressure from the Secular Education Network, amid claims it was about converting children to Christianity.
There's definitely less detail, less biblical detail that goes into it, and it's the emphasis is much more strongly on the value that and the lesson that the kids can take away from it. So the values like respect and treating other people as they want to be treated are very strongly taught in it.
Outside Wharenui School today, one parent, Hamish Webb, says when his son attended the school, he felt pressured to receive religious education. He says he opted out of the classes, but was encouraged by teachers to change his mind.
So he was actually put in the library where he was made to work. And then the teachers encouraged him, if you could go back and do the religious thing, they play games and stuff, it's more fun. So, yeah, he felt it was very much just join the religious thing and don't do your own thing.
Hamish Webb says his daughter, who attends the school, has not had this sort of pressure applied. But he says a religious education class he sat in on did not have a teacher present, despite assurances from the school this would be the case. A Muslim parent, Isha Masoodi, only found out about the classes through her daughter.
It's okay. Yeah, because when I asked to stop, it stopped. Yeah. They put them to something else.
Do you think they should be teaching other religions as well as Christianity? Or
if there are like different kids belonging to different religions, then yeah, everyone's religion should be included.
Noah Gibson, who has been dropped off at school by his uncle, said he had opted out of the classes.
I'm okay with it because there are many others of my classmates, there are about 10 others.
Is it something you're interested in yourself, or?
I think it's going a bit boring for me in the end.
Another parent, Jocelyn Muller, says as a Roman Catholic she has no problem with what her children are being taught.
They're teaching how a child should be. I mean, the good things about being a child and enjoying life.
Yeah. Were you asked if you wanted your children to be part of the religious education, or how did that sort of happen?
No, we weren't told about it. We just learned it from the kids that they were taught about it. But it's okay with me.
Wharenui School itself seemed uncomfortable with the media attention today. At one stage, a teacher even checked with a caregiver that they were okay with a pupil talking to RNZ. When approached for comment, we were told the principal was on leave and the deputy principal was not available. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young Tēnei.
Property owners neighbouring a proposed intensive egg-laying farm in Waikato say it would ruin their small community and are calling for the council to stop it going ahead. Mainland Poultry is seeking a resource consent to turn a dairy farm in Oreni into one of the country's largest cage-free egg-laying farms. But residents are worried about the impact the odour and the 17 sheds will have on their valley. Gemma Brackybush with this report.
Mainland Poultry wants to house 600,000 chickens, pack eggs and rear 200,000 young birds. Although the location on Old Road is in a rural area, residents say the smell, dust, increased traffic and 17 large sheds will have a huge impact on their community. Cara Ferris is one of those and says odour is one of her biggest concerns.
The application refers a lot to the current production units at Wakaiti down in North Otago. Now that's a location that is right on the coast, so with a main offshore breeze. Completely different environment to our little microclimate here, which is a gorgeous little Waikato Valley, but with river fog, completely different circumstances.
Cara Ferris is concerned the council doesn't have to formally notify the community under the Resource Management Act if it determines the farm would have a minor impact.
We're keen to have a conversation around what they're planning, but the change is significant, and putting in an application that says this is a minor impact to the environment is inaccurate, false and misleading to the public, and that the neighbours and the businesses who are here have a right to have a voice in this.
Mainland Poultry staff have been out to discuss the plans with some residents, and its managing director Michael Guthrie says the industry's systems have come a long way.
Because the manure and thing is removed on a very regular basis and off the property, there is no possibility of that creating a smell. Even current cage sheds, they don't have the smell and the odour of the farms of 40, 50 years ago, where they were deep litter pits and the manure sat there for months and months and months until the flock was cleared out and then the manure was cleared out. That's what people have got in their minds.
Animal welfare issues were also raised over the company's consent application, which states the farm would include colony cages. However, Michael Guthrie confirmed to RNZ today the company would make the new farm cage-free to meet shifting consumer demand, which has also driven wider industry change. Countdown and Foodstuffs have both committed to selling only cage-free eggs in 10 years' time. Mr Guthrie says the farm will use an aviary system where birds are free to roam, nest and perch in different levels.
It's a huge amount of capital to change. The different farming techniques, there's a lot more to them. So a lot goes into making a decision. You can't just flick a light switch and say we're going to do this and do that. The thing about Oreni is it's a greenfield site replacing a site further north that is 100% cage at the moment. So this shows you the progression of where the industry's going.
Direct Animal Action opposes colony cages, but its spokesperson Deirdre Sims says cage-free aviary systems is a good step forward, although she'd like to see more research done on them.
There aren't many of them in New Zealand. They haven't really been considered in our Code of Welfare, and they are still very, very intensive. They're multi-tiered with many hens crammed indoors with no access to outside. So that is quite problematic, and we're quite interested in exploring that further.
The Waikato District Council has put the application on hold as it waits for more information from Mainland Poultry. It's yet to determine whether the public will be formally notified, which allows residents to have their say. If the consent is approved, Mainland Poultry hopes to begin building in the next 12 months. Ko Gemma Brackybush, TNA.
27 to 6 coming up on Checkpoint. Officials in Puerto Rico say they're staring down the face of a major humanitarian crisis in the wake of Hurricane Maria. 4 Dunedin school bus routes get a temporary reprieve after being abruptly axed. Lydia Coe returns home. The New Zealand Women's Open, she's going to play in it. Nona has business news, but before all of that, with the 26.5 minutes to 6 headlines, here is Katrina Batten.
The county's Manukau District Health Board is planning to offer some of its staff, including all clinicians, the opportunity for voluntary redundancy. The DHB operates Auckland's Middlemore Hospital. A DHB source told Checkpoint the hospital is already struggling with too few staff. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says his party won't make a decision on coalition negotiations until all special votes are counted. That's expected by October the 7th. Mr Peters has criticised the media for speculating on what factors could influence the party's decision. The police say a 29-year-old man who was seen on CCTV near to where a man's body was found is now helping them with their inquiries. A 69-year-old resident was found dead in a stairwell in the Auckland suburb of Western Springs late last night. The police say he died after a vicious attack. The president of the Maori Women's Welfare League says it shouldn't be up to the Pākehā majority to decide if the Maori seat should remain. Prue Kapua is opposing a referendum on the seats as being proposed by Winston Peters. She's criticised successive governments for what she describes as institutional racism. About 8,000 people are crammed into evacuation centres on the Vanuatu island of Ambai, with hundreds more likely to arrive. Most of the island's population has been relocated as the volcano at the island centre continues to erupt. The evacuees are crowded into 15 evacuation centres where authorities say they're struggling to cope. Residents living next to what could become one of the country's largest egg-laying farms are calling on the Waikato District Council to stop it going ahead. Mainland Poultry wants to house up to 800,000 birds. A local resident, Cara Ferris, says the community believes the odour and increased traffic will ruin their community. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Business News now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
Hello.
Workers more optimistic about keeping their jobs or finding a new one than they have been in almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Where's that research from and what's it telling us?
Well, it's the Westpac McDermott Miller survey, and they're saying that the number of people who feel this very, strong confidence in their jobs and or even finding a new job has edged up to the highest level since the global financial crisis, and at 113.8. So it's a little bit more than it was the last survey, but it's significant, and it shows that people are very confident. However, they're not confident about wage growth, no. So they're not expecting to get more money for the jobs that they have. So that's quite interesting. We've done a lot of work today on jobs, and more jobs. Yeah, a lot of interesting different reports that have come out. One of the things that's interesting is an initiative by employers to hire people that don't have a qualification but have the right attitude to fit some of the jobs that are coming up where, really people don't have those qualifications because the jobs are so new. So, yeah, it's been a day of a lot of labour market news, and so we've got some exciting, well, I don't know if it's going to be exciting. We're going to have some more news tomorrow in terms of the Reserve Bank. We've got the acting governor, Governor Grant Spencer, at the helm, and he's going to be talking about the official cash rate. We're not expecting any change there, so I guess he won't have too tough of a job ahead of him. But the dollar, it's been a little bit low.
I just want to interrupt and say I love the fact that you think a Reserve Bank announcement is exciting. Go Nona.
We
all do. Everyone does, Nona.
I'm sure it is for Grant Spencer's first one. Come on, it's going to be good, right?
What happened on the markets?
Okay, so the dollar is steady at 72.1 cents, and against the Australian it's at 91.5 and 53.6 pence. I think that basically the Asian markets were a little bit more excited today because Donald Trump's tax reform policies, we might be hearing some details about it later in the day in New York. So we'll see what happens with that. There's some optimism. And guess what? Yeah, the NZ Top 50 Index, in line with the movement in Asia, we have actually hit a new record high. Yep. Yeah. We rose 1/3%, 27 points to 7,914.
So that's the first time ever over 7,900, is it?
Yeah, it probably is, actually. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm sure it must be. Let's see. Let's do the maths.
OK, we'll talk about the Reserve Bank tomorrow. Thanks, Nona. Appreciate it. Officials on the US territory of Puerto Rico say they're staring down the face of a major humanitarian crisis in the wake of Hurricane Marina and are accusing the Trump administration of dragging its feet. The president has defended his response. He plans to travel to the Caribbean island next week to see the damage for himself. He sparked criticism on Twitter by appearing to blame the Puerto Ricans for their own problems in comments which referenced the territory's financial and infrastructure problems and debts owed to US banks. But the focus of his Twitter time in the last few days has been on the ongoing stoush with the National Football League about kneeling. CNM's Jim Acosta has more.
President Trump appears to be calling a timeout in his fixation on pro football players protesting during the national anthem and turning his attention to more urgent matters, like the unfolding disaster in Puerto Rico.
I wasn't preoccupied with the NFL. I was ashamed of what was taking place because, to me, that was a very important moment. I don't think you can disrespect our country, our flag, our national anthem. To me, the NFL situation is a very important situation. I've heard that before about was I preoccupied. Not at all. Not at all. I have plenty of time on my hands. All I do is work.
Now, the White House is posting photos of the president on the phone with local officials in Puerto Rico and rushing federal officials to the microphones at the White House.
This is a logistically challenging, very unique event.
People of Puerto Rico.
The president is patting himself on the back while noting bringing hurricane relief to the U.S. island territory is difficult.
We have had tremendous reviews from government officials, but the governor of Puerto Rico is so thankful for the great job that we're doing. Frankly, we're doing, and it's the most difficult job because it's on the island. It's on an island in the middle of the ocean. It's out in the ocean. You can't just drive your trucks there from other states.
But on the ground in Puerto Rico, there are still desperate pleas for assistance from island officials, from the mayor of San Juan.
When I say there's a humanitarian crisis, and I am sorry, I know that leaders aren't supposed to cry and stuff. Perhaps it's a sign of weakness. Well, you know, the weak out there are waiting for us. We're not getting to everybody in time. People, especially the elderly, are being locked up in buildings.
To the governor.
We need more help. We need more help with resources. We need more help with people being deployed so that we can get logistical support elsewhere.
Democrats are warning the president help is not coming fast enough.
If you don't take this crisis seriously, this is going to be your Katrina.
On social media, the president has made it clear where his focus lies, on the NFL players protesting during football games. He's tweeted about the NFL 24 times since Saturday, compared to just 4 times on Puerto Rico.
It's CNN's Jim Acosta. Health authorities are investigating the prospect of opening a human breast milk bank in Auckland. The bank would allow women to donate breast milk to mothers who are struggling to feed their babies. Currently, parents are going to huge lengths to source milk donated by other mothers, but that can be expensive and risky. Rowan Quinn reports.
Lisa Ashley's gone to great lengths to source breast milk for her baby Marcello. He suffers from a digestive disorder that means he can scream in pain for hours if he's given formula. Like most mums in the same situation, Lisa relies on donated breast milk, which she mostly finds online.
Sometimes it can be really difficult. We have done 270-kilometre return trips around Auckland to collect milk anywhere from 400 mils to a few litres, and come home with a massive chili bins filled in the back of our car.
Lisa Ashley says it's terrifying when she runs out of milk, and it would be a relief to have a regular central source like a milk bank.
It would mean a lot to mums who are constantly having to do a milk hunt, is what we call the milk hunt, every day, because sometimes we have to travel great distances to pick up just a small amount, and that might only last us a day or two, and then we're back on the hunt.
The Auckland District Health Board's been trying to find out if other parents want the same service. It's been surveying parents through the Neonatal Trust, which supports families of the most vulnerable premature babies and newborns. The survey asks 2 questions. Would parents use donated breast milk, and would they donate breast milk? The Trust's Chief Executive, Neil O'Styke, says a milk bank would be fantastic.
It'll reduce the stress of their journey if they know that their baby's getting the maximum benefit that's available to them.
Mothers in Auckland like Lisa are left seeking help at the moment directly from other mums or breastfeeding networks. Emma Ryburn-Penksavath co-founded the group Mother's Milk New Zealand, a social media network to connect donors and mums.
There's so many mums out there who have got bucket loads of milk, and then there's the ones that are struggling to just get started, or they've got a health issue, and so to be able to give that donor milk to that mother is such a relief.
But the donation process can be time-consuming and expensive, especially if couriers are involved. Donating mothers should have a series of tests from their GP to ensure their milk is free from diseases like HIV and hepatitis, but not all of them do. A milk bank would mean the milk is properly screened and pasteurised, minimising the risk of infection. The Canterbury DHB has the only breast milk bank in the country as part of its neonatal intensive care unit. A long-term Christchurch midwife, Yvonne Hiskamuller, is fundraising to try and make it available to the whole community.
It is expensive. The latest I've heard from the neonatal unit is it's costing $186 a litre, I think is what I was told. And so we're aiming to pasteurise 16 litres a day.
For the record, that's $3,000 a day, and Ms Hiskamuller says the initial setup's likely to cost $250,000. The Auckland District Health Board wouldn't answer any questions about its investigation, only saying it's made no formal commitment to supporting a breast milk bank. I Tāmaki Makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Rowan Quinn DNA.
Lydia Ko is back in the country to host the New Zealand Women's Open in Auckland this week. The 20-year-old headlines, she's still only 20, headlines the event, which is LPGA Tour sanctioned for the first time. Ko's a three-time winner of the National Open, but she hasn't won a tournament on the LPGA Tour in 15 months. Despite being the host at Auckland's new Windross Farm golf course, Ko told our sports reporter Matt Chatterton she doesn't consider herself the favourite to win.
I don't think I would call myself the favourite, but I know that it's nice to have played well the last couple events, coming into my National Open, and I was struggling the last few months, so it was nice to have those finishes, coming here, and if you start getting the top 10s and being in contention, those are the things that build your confidence, and at the end of the day, everyone is so talented out here. It's little things like confidence that make the huge difference.
Do you see this as one of your best chances, I guess, to break that sort of 15-month winless drought? And could you just touch a little bit also on what that's been like? Has it been frustrating at all this past year?
I don't think there is a huge advantage, of me playing in New Zealand that, will give me that miracle point. I think the big thing for me is that, I'm going to be pumped to see, a lot of fans out there and to play at home. I think that's a really cool thing, but, I don't think being here necessarily, will be a huge difference. It's going to be like any other LPGA event, and that's kind of the mindset that I've been taking. And it's it's hard when you know that the pieces are there, but you just don't know exactly what's going on. And I really wasn't making that many birdies. And when you're not making birdies, you're obviously not going to score. So it's kind of at that stage, but having the top 10 in Indianapolis, I think gave me really a lot of confidence to Evian, and had my best finish at a major championship this year. So that's why said earlier, it's little things like confidence. I'm pretty sure within a couple weeks my talent hasn't increased that much, and just playing well and seeing those putts drop and getting the confidence of hitting fairways, those are the things that build up to better scores at the end of the week.
Lydia Ko, who says she hopes free entry to the tournament for children would encourage more young people to come along and take an interest in the sport. Is the school holidays next week, is it? Free entry for children. Peo Cruz was a promising young rugby player from France. He came to New Zealand as an exchange student at Auckland's Long Bay College. On January 8th this year at about 1:30 in the morning, he was one of 5 passengers in a car driven by 18-year-old Cobus Alberts. Alberts had picked Peo and his friends up from a party. Alberts had been drinking, he was still on his learner's licence, and the Honda Civic he was driving had no warrant and 2 bald front tyres. He was driving at 78k in a 60k zone when he lost control, hit the curb and overcorrected, spinning out on the median strip and swinging the car 180 degrees before slamming the right side of the car into a tree. Peo died at the scene. Today, Alberts was sentenced at the North Shore District Court to home detention for a year. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay was there, and he joins us in the studio now. Hi, Eddie. There was a packed gallery, was there?
There was. Many young people in the gallery, friends of both Peo and Alberts. Also, Peo's New Zealand host family were there. Peo's father, Olivier Cruz, he flew out from France to be here today as well. He read a statement to the court telling of the horror of getting that phone call at 5 in the morning in France that his son had been killed on the other side of the world. He spoke of meeting with the Alberts. He flew out here straight after it happened, and he met with Alberts after the crash. He said, he told the court today, he got quite emotional at times as well, that he expected to be invited into the Alberts family home to meet with them. Instead, this meeting happened in a hotel room. He said that Alberts wanted to read a statement on his phone, and Mr. Cruz said that statement was far too well written for a 19-year-old. He said it appeared to have been written by a lawyer. Mr. Cruz told the court that he had wanted a full and frank conversation with Alberts about what had happened on this night, and instead he came away feeling dissatisfied. He said that also Alberts told him he'd only had a couple of beers with some mates before driving, and the court heard today how in fact Alberts had drunken 8 cans of whiskey premixes. He had a blood alcohol reading of 60 micrograms per 100 mils of blood. The legal limit for under 20s is 0. And Mr. Cruz said he'd wanted this full and frank conversation. The Crown Prosecutor Jo Murdoch, she said that Alberts should be sent to jail after pleading guilty to these 3 charges: that's dangerous driving causing death, dangerous driving causing injury, and the drink driving charge. She said, as well as the aggravating factors that you read in the intro, another young man in the car, there were 4 passengers in the back seat. Another young man in the back seat, he was left with concussion, whiplash and a tear in his lung as well from the crash.
And Alberts was prepared to go to prison, was he?
That's what his lawyer, Mike Lloyd, said. He said that wouldn't be the appropriate outcome. He said his client was supported in court by a former rugby coach who actually has taken him in and into his home. He's given him a job in his roofing business as well. Mr. Lloyd said a sentence of imprisonment would act as a wouldn't act as a deterrent or undo any harm caused by this, but instead it would only damage Alberts' chance at rehabilitation. And Judge Sinclair said no sentence that she passed would bring back Peo. She quoted another victim impact statement that described the crash as a stupid and tragic accident that happened despite these countless media campaigns that we see, about speeding and drink driving. She took time off Alberts' sentence for his early guilty plea, his youth, his previous good character. Judge also accepted Alberts was truly remorseful and quoted him describing, presumably from a letter to the court, describing the trauma of having Peo dying in his arms at the scene. As well as the 12 months home detention, Alberts will carry out 200 hours of community work. He'll pay $3,000 in emotional harm to Peo's family, $1,500 to the young man who was injured, his family as well.
Now, the cloud does not have any silver lining when you've lost a child in these circumstances, right? Full stop. But something rather wonderful has happened, Eddie, has it?
Yeah, rather miraculously, really. Mr. Cruz, Peo's father, he's actually organising a rugby match in April between Peo's friends in New Zealand and those in France. It's going to be played in France, and it'll take place in April. He's started up a Facebook page called Live Like Peo, and he's selling rugby balls with that slogan emblazoned on them, the sort of a Kiwi motif and a rooster as well. And that's to fundraise for this match. And the game has support from some huge names. There's photos of Joe Rokithoko holding a ball. There's photos of Dan Carter posing with a ball. There's a video from Luke McAllister, who of course is playing rugby over in France as well, and he played for North Harbour. Plays the same position that Peo did, second 5'8". Mr. Cruz says he hopes to maintain this link between the North Shore and France, and he says he's now focusing on that. He's the sort of negative part of the saga's over for him.
That is a very moving story, Eddie Gay. Edward Gay, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. 4 Dunedin school bus routes have got a temporary reprieve after being abruptly axed. There'd been an outcry from parents and the school after the operator Go Bus decided a fortnight ago to cut the school buses without consultation. Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer filed this report on the latest.
The public gallery at today's Otago Regional Council meeting was full of parents and principals, and they urged councillors to intervene. One Otago Peninsula parent, Kirsten Nielsen, whose son takes the bus and whose 2 younger children are likely to use it, told councillors the public bus alternative is not a safe option.
At 11 and 12 years old, they are too young
to be unsupervised catching a regular public bus for such a long distance into town. They have to cross the busy roads, which has been mentioned, but most of the crossings are uncontrolled. They'd have to walk unsupervised for several kilometres through the back streets of Dunedin, and as mentioned, they have to wait for long periods at bus shelters, but most of those bus shelters are unsheltered, so they will arrive at school and at home wet and cold on many days.
Ms Nielsen says her family and many others would have to consider moving closer to town if the school bus route wasn't brought back. It's that sort of talk that alarms the Otago Peninsula Community Board's chairperson, Paul Pope.
For us, the loss of the school bus service on the Otago Peninsula is actually a real threat to our community. It also, for some people in the lower income end of things, it also represents significant hardship as well.
Principals laid it on thick as they urged the council to help keep the buses in place for the last term of the year, while they work out what to do next year. The principal of Bayfield High School in South Dunedin, Judith Forbes, said students have few safe options for getting to school. Ms Forbes says the public bus timetable either has students at school half an hour early or half an hour late. And she says even walking's become too dangerous for some.
One of these students tried walking to school one day. You will be aware that the only footpath is also in places the cycle lane. This young boy arrived at school bleeding and quite badly injured, having been hit by a cyclist travelling at high speed.
The regional councillors got the message. Councillor Brian Scott said the route was a private commercial service the council had no involvement in. But he said there was clearly a moral obligation to step in because the parents would have no bus service in 2 weeks' time through no fault of their own.
We have to get on with this. And as a council, we need to show ourselves in this difficult situation as being able to respond and having the will to respond.
But Councillor Michael Deaker asked what would happen if other operators started threatening to drop school services too.
If they decide, not enough profit in this, we're out. Are we going to do the same again and again and again? We have no business in this. It's a private arrangement.
The debate raged on, but in the end, a consensus. Councillors agreed to broker a solution between the schools, bus operators and parents, and to make a financial contribution to help, but only for one term. The question of what Peninsula residents will do next year is still up in the air. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
3 Waipu teenagers behind a Maori thrash metal band have been signed by a Berlin-based music agency for the European metal market. This is unusual. Our Maori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes with Alien Weaponry.
The De Jong brothers were raised with the stories of Indigenous struggle.
Metal's always super political with its lyrics and stuff. There are a lot of Maori that are really into metal, you know, and it was kind of weird for us to be the first ones to do it, honestly.
Along with their friend Ethan Trenbath, they've found a winning way to get their political message across in a genre not usually associated with Maori music.
It feels like you're doing a haka, honestly. It's that same, just riled up feeling you get when you're just going absolutely crazy doing it.
The trio, who attend Ruakaka School and hail from Waipu, say they've got the whole Northland town into thrash metal.
Well, we like to think of it as the heavy metal centre of the university.
They're all into metal. The butchery loves metal, the lady on the scooter loves metal, the dude who sells oysters loves metal, the lady going shopping loves metal, and even the cows love metal. So we've got animals loving metal in Waipu. It's pretty awesome.
The De Jong brothers are from Ngāti Pukeau and Te Arawa is their iwi. They're proud to showcase te reo Māori and the history of our lands.
It's really valuable to Māori here in New Zealand because a lot of kids that I know at school and stuff, their parents don't necessarily know much about their whakapapa or their history or anything like that. So it's really good to be able to learn that from the old man.
And the old man, the boy's father, Neil De Jong, he learnt the oral history from his grandmother.
When I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me stories. And, she'd often tell the same stories. And it's funny, when you're a teenager, you always go, oh Dad, is this one again? But, we do it when we Like when we drive south, we drive down to Kirikiridoa, we'll go, past Rangiriri. And I'll always say to the boys, oh, here's Rangiriri. And, it looks like nothing because you're just driving along the road and there's a couple of, lumps on the hill. But, when you relate it to the story of Rangiriri, and you can say, well, those lumps on the hill are actually the remains of the fortifications that were done. And you can see how the river's on this side and the swamps on that side. And that's why they chose this place to put the pa to stop the British. And then the kids are interested. A couple of lumps in a paddock are now, have some kind of meaning. So the kids know now when we drive down through there, through Rangiriri, that's what that is, So
at 12 and 14, the boys set a goal to play in Europe, and at 15 and 17, their dream is turning into a reality. The Berlin-based music agency Das Machine has signed them for 3 years and opened the door to festivals across the world. Ruana Te Whenua, the group's hit song about the land, has snagged over 815,000 views on Facebook.
It's about me and Lewis Tupuna who fought at Gate Pa defending Tauranga Moana from the British, who were coming there to pretty much stop them thinking for themselves and establish a big British colony.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The county's Manukau District Health Board is planning to offer some of its staff, including all clinicians, voluntary redundancy. The DHB, which runs Auckland's Middlemore Hospital, confirmed the plan after a letter from the chief executive to staff was leaked to Checkpoint. The letter says the scheme offers staff an opportunity to request a payment if they leave. In a statement, the acting chief executive, Gloria Johnson, says it focuses on staff on individual contracts and those at the top of salary bands. She says the aim is to free resources from some parts of the organisation and move them to frontline services. A DHB source has told Checkpoint the move is sharply at odds with recent suggestions the hospital is struggling with too few staff. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has lashed out at the media after meeting with his new caucus to discuss who he'll go into government with. He's confirmed no decision will be made on a coalition partner until after the special votes are announced on October the 7th. He called a news conference this afternoon and spent most of it giving the media a feature-length ear-bashing for their election coverage. But between insults, he did say he would stick to his October the 12th deadline of announcing who he would do a deal with. Mr Peters says he and his colleagues today went through all the options and came up with 9 possible coalition scenarios. A potential referendum on the future of the Maori seats is being described as another example of institutional racism. The president of the Māori Women's Welfare League, Prue Kapua, made the comment at the league's annual conference today in New Plymouth. Winston Peters has campaigned on holding a referendum and is likely to feature in coalition negotiations. Labour has ruled it out, but National is leaving it open. Ms Kapua says it's a decision for Māori.
Those whole issues about institutional racism and decisions being made by the majority don't sit well in terms of, a decision about whether we have Māori seats is not a decision for the Pākehā majority to make.
Prue Kapua of the Māori Women's Welfare League. Residents living next to what could become one of the country's largest egg-laying farms are calling on the Waikato District Council to stop it going ahead. Mainland Poultry wants to turn an existing dairy farm at Oreni into an operation using up to 800,000 birds. A local resident, Cara Ferris, says neighbours believe the odour and increased traffic would ruin their community. But Mainland Poultry's Managing Director, Michael Guthrie, says the odour would have only a minor impact. The council has put the process on hold while it seeks more information from the company. In Saudi Arabia, women have reacted with joy to King Salman's decree allowing them to drive for the first time. It will come into force in June next year. Saudi Arabia has been the only country in the world to stop women driving. Some have been fined and jailed for attempting to get behind the wheel. Saha Nassif, who's long campaigned for women to be given the right to drive, says the news came as a very happy surprise.
My son called me and he said, "Congratulations, Mom." I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "They allowed you to drive." I said, "You're kidding." And I had to put the Saudi channel on to make sure it's true. And then I hung up and I was singing, and my mom called and she said, "You heard about it?" I said, "Yes." And I said, "You see, Mom?" He said, "Don't dream." Well, we dream and we get what we dream.
Zaha Nassif says she's going to buy her dream car, a black and yellow convertible Mustang. Lady Lucan, the wife of an English aristocrat who mysteriously vanished more than 4 decades ago, has been found dead at her London home. The police forced entry to the house after she was reported missing and found her unresponsive. They say the 80-year-old's death is not believed to be suspicious. Lady Lucan was one of the last people to see her husband John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, alive before he disappeared. He vanished after the murdered body of Sandra Rivet, nanny to their 3 children, was found at the family home in November 1974. The same night as his disappearance, the attacker also turned on Lady Lucan, beating her severely before she managed to escape. Even though Lord Lucan was officially declared dead in 1999, he has reportedly been sighted in Australia, Ireland, South Africa and New Zealand. There are even claims he fled to India and lived life as a hippie called Jungly Barry. It's 6:04. To sport, and the Greens are playing on the mind of Lydia Ko ahead of the New Zealand Women's Golf Open, which begins at Windross Farm in Auckland tomorrow. Ko, the world number 8, is the top-ranked player in the field, which includes 7 major winners. After a couple of practice rounds, Ko says she's still trying to come to terms with the Greens.
Because it is such a new golf course, it is firm. So if you're coming in with longer clubs, obviously it's going to be trickier to, hold the greens or get near the pin positions. And some greens are firmer than others.
Lydia Ko. England shouldn't bother heading to Australia for the Ashes if controversial all-rounder Ben Stokes isn't in the squad, according to former England cricketer Kevin Peterson. The New Zealand-born Stokes has been dropped for the side's next one-dayer against the West Indies after being arrested in Bristol for allegedly being involved in a brawl. Peterson has said on social media if Stokes isn't picked for disciplinary reasons, England may as well stay at home for the tour, which starts in November. Champion League football title holders Real Madrid have beaten Borussia Dortmund 3-1 in their group match to make it 2 wins from 2 so far in this season's competition. In the same pool, Tottenham are also 2 from 2 after a 3-0 win over Apoel Nicosia of Cyprus, while Manchester City beat Shakhtar Donetsk 2-0 to go into the top of their group. Liverpool drew 1-1 at Spartak Moscow. That's the news.
Will Winston go blue or red?
My gut feeling suggests national, but there's going to be a lot of blood on the floor before that happens. I think that would be the neatest and cleanest.
Education eyes the black.
I don't know how that's going to pan out because I've never been in this spot before, but I will absolutely be taking that to the table at any table I manage to get to.
And council goes yellow.
If you are pretending to be official, it's a crime. Whereas if it's amateurish and you're not pretending to be the council, then it's a very hard argument for them to prosecute.
Colourful language. Morning Report with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the Black Ferns finally get their celebration. But is it enough for all they've achieved? And after 10, Neil Cross, the creator of the hit TV thriller Luther, on his new pre-apocalyptic crime drama. Join me, Lynn Freeman, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland and Auckland. Mainly fine, isolated showers in the east this afternoon. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne. Periods of rain with some heavy falls about the ranges. Rain easing to a few showers in Bay of Plenty today, heavy inland in the afternoon. Hawke's Bay, scattered showers developing, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms about the ranges, clearing from the south tomorrow. The remainder of the North Island, fine spells, scattered showers inland during the afternoons and evenings, some heavy and possible thunderstorms about the central and southern ranges this afternoon. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine spells, scattered showers inland during the afternoons and evenings, some heavy today with possible afternoon thunderstorms. Otago, Southland and Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated afternoon showers inland, high cloud increasing tomorrow. For Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain tomorrow evening, and the Chatham Islands, rain at times. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Kingmaker or Queenmaker Winston Peters returned to Parliament today with the media in his sights. The New Zealand First Leader hit out at the Fourth Estate, criticising journalists for what he described as tripe and drivel, and called for some understanding in the wake of the election. Mr Peters held a media conference at Parliament but declared it would be his last until after October the 7th, the date the special votes will be announced. He targeted one story in particular which said the politician was up to his old tricks of keeping everyone guessing.
The reality is you could point to the Electoral Commission and others and ask yourself why it is that 384,000 people will not have their vote counted until the 7th of October. And maybe then, with a bit of presence of mind, you could say to yourselves, that may be the reason why New Zealand First has to withhold its view, because we don't know yet what the exact, precise voice of the New Zealand people is. And certainly most not would be the case if you have 384,000, that's 15% of the vote, yet to be counted. That will change things, in my view. That's been our experience in the past, and we want to have regard to that. Now, as for today's meeting, we met as a caucus to run through every possible permutation or option that we had. We first of all forswore as a group of MPs to ensure that we didn't put our own personal views from the leader to the most newest member of caucus above the interests of the party and above the interests of the country. That's what I said on election night, and that's what we're going to do. I want to tell you that we're not going to be persuaded or dissuaded by any of the speculative drivel that's been written by some of you around this country, and you should be, frankly, ashamed of yourselves.
Winston Peters speaking at Parliament today. Our political reporter May Heron has been covering all of this and joins us now live from Parliament. Hi, May. A pretty scathing attack on the media there from Winston Peters, although in one form or another, nothing he hasn't said before, really.
Yeah, exactly, John. We're pretty used to having these sort of robust exchanges with Winston Peters. I think in one shape or form, most of us journalists have had a conversation like that. And he's kind of carried this throughout his campaign. He's said several times that the news media have failed to follow him, failed to cover him, failed to give him very much attention during the election campaign, which for RNZ isn't true. We've had one of our RNZ reporters with him the entire time. But, you know, through these little insults today at this news conference, we did learn some things about what Mr Peters was thinking. He says that he will not be making any, concrete decisions or concrete negotiations until after these special votes have been counted, and that's October the 7th. So that's not this weekend, but the weekend after.
Yes.
And so he says this is really important because he wants to know what the entire nation is thinking. There is quite a few of those votes to be counted up. He says that he may talk to Bill English and Jacinda Ardern before then, but he says that he kind of knows where they're sitting anyway, and especially in terms of their policies. He says he's been watching the campaign so far, and so he knows where those parties sit. Mr Peters also reiterated that his party would decide which way they would go by October the 12th, and its membership will also be consulted over the next couple of days. Mr Peters says that there are 9 different options his party could take. He wouldn't reveal what those 9 were, though, but he says the caucus will be walking through each and every one of those 9 different possible options.
You mentioned caucus, May. This media conference was held after the first New Zealand First caucus meeting, right?
Yes, so the whole caucus came and met today at the airport earlier today. Most of the media bumped into Shane Jones, who is obviously one of the MPs, and he arrived carrying 2 polystyrene boxes of crayfish, one under each arm actually. One had female crayfish, the other one had male crayfish, and he joked to the media about which one Winston Peters might pick, obviously alluding a little bit to the National and Labour leaders there. But on a serious note, he said, that today's meeting, the caucus meeting, was about getting all together, meeting some new faces, him obviously being one of them. One of the other MPs, Tracy Martin, she said at the airport today that no single party has a so-called moral mandate to form a government. She says that this is MMP and this is how it works.
Yeah, and Winston Peters was making the same point, right, at his media conference. What's happening with other political parties, May? What are they up to?
Well, it's kind of in a little bit of a waiting zone at the moment. Labour's leader Jacinda Ardern was out and about today. She visited a school for teenage parents near Wellington. She says that her team is currently going through their policies to see where the areas of common are with New Zealand First and the Green Party, but she's not creating any expectations around that either. The Greens today also held some initial talks with their negotiating team. They too are preparing for some discussions. And the National Party, they're also in a holding pattern. And in fact, all of us are kind of in this holding pattern, yes, waiting to see what's going to happen, waiting to see what Winston Peters will do. But we do now know, I guess, that date, that important date, October the 12th, that's when he says he's going to make his decision by.
May Heron in a holding pattern and not talking tripe or drivel, joining us live from Parliament. Thanks very much indeed, May. Meanwhile, the Maori Women's Welfare League says if a referendum is held on the future of the Maori seats, it will be yet another example of institutional racism against tangata whenua. Against the backdrop of negotiations to form the next government, the League is holding its 65th annual conference in New Plymouth this weekend. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter, Robin Martin, went along.
The leader of the New Zealand First Party, Winston Peters, has said he wants a referendum on the future of the Maori seats, and it's likely to feature in coalition negotiations. Labour, which swept the Maori seats, has ruled it out, and it's not an idea the president of the Maori Women's Welfare League, Prue Kapua, supports either. Ms Kapua, who criticised the institutional racism of successive governments in her opening address today, says it should be for Maori to decide whether or not the seats should eventually go.
The general consensus appears to be that a referendum, as I talked about today, those whole issues about institutional racism and decisions being made by the majority don't sit well in terms of, you know, a decision about whether we have Māori seats is not a decision for the Pākehā majority to make.
Ms Kapua says the League could advocate even more directly for Māori now that the Māori Party is out of Parliament.
The issues that we're absolutely fundamentally concerned with are much bigger than politics. It's about our tamariki, it's about our whānau, it's about education, it's about justice. So those are the issues that we can't get embroiled in the variances that occur in politics. We just have to deal with them, whoever's there.
While Ms Kapua says the League can work with whichever political parties take control, some delegates had clearer preferences. Tainui delegate Jamie Toko was hoping Labour could woo Winston Peters.
For our people, Labour, Greens, New Zealand First coalition.
And why is that?
Well, because we have all 7 Māori seats now, and we'll have a significant voice in a government that's led by Labour. So, yeah.
Robina Wickham of Pātea reckoned it would be Mr Peters' call.
He is the kingmaker at this stage. You know, I'm hoping he'll go with Labour, but I don't think that's going to happen. He may go with National because it's the bigger opportunity for him. He will, to be really honest, he will go with the one that's going to make him that kingmaker.
Many delegates worried about the Māori Party's exit from Parliament, but Kuia Makiri Meri Pike of Waitara says that also presented an opportunity.
It happened for a reason, because it's also about the tree. When the tree has had enough, it needs to die and then needs to come back to life, because the seed will grow again. Kei te kakono I te rākau, e putu atu o ngā iwi o te ao. So when the tree has gone and another seed is planted, it will become true to itself.
On the question of a referendum on Māori seats, Ms Wickham expressed a fear common amongst delegates.
I would worry what would happen more for Māori. You know, if you go to other countries, the Indigenous people have, well, actually they don't really have a say, so I worry for our Māori in that sense.
The conference continues until Saturday and features speakers including Governor-General Dame Patsy Reddy and Race Relations Commissioner Dame Susan Defoe. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Robin Martin aho.
6:17. The parents of the American student Otto Warmbier have shared horrific details of his condition when he arrived home from North Korea. Of course, Otto was jailed in Pyongyang last year for stealing a hotel sign. He was released on medical grounds in June but arrived back in the US seriously ill and died days later. North Korea says he contracted botulism, but doctors found no trace of it. Fred and Cindy Warmbier say the North Koreans were terrorists who systematically tortured their son. The ABC's Barney Porter has this report.
Fred Warmbier has told US media he was prompted to speak publicly about the death of his son Otto after hearing North Korea claiming to be a victim. He's painfully recounted the moment he and his wife Sydney saw their son for the first time since his arrest in North Korea in January 2016.
We climbed to the top of the steps and we looked in, and Otto was on the stretcher across in the plane, and he was jerking violently, making these inhuman sounds.
The details become even more graphic.
Otto had a shaved head. He had a feeding tube coming out of his nose. He was staring blankly into space, jerking violently. He was blind. He was deaf. As we looked at him and tried to comfort him, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth.
Otto Warmbier was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment with hard labour after being convicted of trying to steal a propaganda poster from his hotel. At some stage in his captivity, he suffered a severe neurological injury from a still unknown cause. North Korean authorities didn't disclose his mental condition until last June, when they announced he had fallen into a coma as a result of a combination of botulism and a sleeping pill. After diplomatic efforts, Otto Warmbier was released in a comatose state after 17 months in captivity. He returned home but died 6 days later.
Within 2 days of Otto being home, his fever spiked to 104 degrees. He had a large scar on his right foot. North Korea is not a victim. They're terrorists.
They destroyed him.
They purposely and intentionally injured Otto.
The revelations have come as President Donald Trump fired the latest salvo in the ever-escalating war of words with North Korea. The president still insists diplomacy is the first path he'll take to resolve the crisis over the North's missile and nuclear programs. But
we're totally prepared for the second option, not a preferred option. But if we take that option, it will be devastating. I can tell you that, devastating for North Korea. That's called the military option. If we have to take it, we will.
Then he repeated his determination to end the standoff in his own way.
North Korea is a situation that should have been handled 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and it could have been handled much more easily. You had various administrations, many administrations, which left me a mess, but I'll fix the mess.
The Warmbiers, meanwhile, have a final comment when asked about a possible motive for the treatment of their son.
And the fact that Otto was alone all that time with no one to comfort him is inexcusable. And whatever happened, I mean, why would you do this?
That report from ABC's Barney Porter. That was Cindy Warmbier, Otto's mum, ending it. The Canterbury Museum has been the target of an unknown visitor armed with a label maker. Now, the culprit has been leaving official-looking signs posted around the museum exhibits, advising people to do things they're simply not allowed to do. Our reporter Rachel Graham went along to investigate.
I'm at the Christchurch Museum now, and I've been told that there's been someone who's been sneaking around the museum and inserting their own labels on things. So I'm on the lookout for a label that doesn't look quite right. Press to hear a waiata about Aoraki. That seems legitimate. Children are invited to ride the horse. Seems okay. Beware of the glass. Sounds like good advice. Where do I know that guy from? That doesn't seem quite right. I met up with the Deputy Director of the Canterbury Museum, Jennifer Storer, to find out what is going on.
There's been someone who's visited the museum and has literally put their hands to print and then posted up little signs on some of the objects. Okay, so we've had it on 3 occasions. The first we thought was one-off when we just sort of dismissed it, and then we've had a couple of more occasions. And by and large, I think a graphic artist or someone with a bit of talent has done it, and then they've come in secretively, quickly rubbed it onto the display case, and then left.
So have you got out the fingerprinting crews out, any extra security, anything like that?
No, look, by and large it hasn't worried us greatly to date because it hasn't hurt anything. At the same time, we don't want to encourage it because if someone actually did put this kind of thing on an object, well, then it would damage it. And, you know, we're in charge of keeping these things safe.
And so what have the labels been saying?
So, for instance, we've got one on a little icon, religious icon in the Asian Arts Gallery, and a little quirky phrase, and this one says, "And where do I know that guy from?" So, nothing rude. Again, that might worry us if it was offensive. But, yeah, just something quite quirky, and we've discovered them as we've walked around. But, yeah.
And was one of the other ones instructing people to touch something that they shouldn't be touching?
That's right. It was actually on some rock crystals, and although a lot of things in museums look robust, but are actually quite sensitive. So no, we took that one down straight away because we didn't want people touching it, and therefore, you know, we don't want this thing going on broadly, but we did think it was quite a clever. If you're going to be a clever vandal, that was relatively clever.
And the message from the museum to the quirky vandal is they know what you're up to and they want you to leave your labels at home from now on. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Core Rachel Graham, 10A.
Some feedback before we move on about the story that we began the program with tonight about voluntary redundancies at the county's Manukau DHB. Have the health boards looked at how many managers each one employs at generous salaries and how many each board really needs? Too many chiefs and not enough Indians. I feel sick listening to this. Another listener says, Middlemore, I've always felt safe working for a DHB, not anymore. And Judy says, I worked in an Australian hospital where if you turned up an emergency and your problem could have been dealt with by a GP, you were charged a GP fee, which kept numbers down. Lots of feedback on religion in schools too. We'll have that shortly. But first, the actress Liz Dawn, who made her name as one of Coronation Street's most popular characters, Vera Duckworth, has died at the age of 77. For more than 30 years, millions of viewers enjoyed her portrayal of the argumentative but generous Vera and her turbulent relationship with her on-screen husband, Jack. The BBC's David Silito reports on the life of one of the street's most enduring stars.
Hey, Jack, look what I've got!
For 34 years, Liz Dawn played Vera Duckworth, the long-suffering wife and comic foil to Jack. Life was a permanent battle to prise him away from either the pub or the pigeons. When she bought an ornamental dog thinking it would make a pair with the one she already owned, little did she know it was the one Jack had just sold.
Now, Vera, be reasonable. I'll give you be reasonable.
Her real name was Sylvia Butterfield. Born in Leeds, she made ends meet, singing in a nightclub as Liz Dawn. The part of Vera changed everything.
Salt of the earth. I think she's great. She's got a job, hasn't she?
One of the many actors she played opposite was Tracy Brabin. There is, she says, much they'll miss.
Her kindness, her generosity, her natural comedy timing and talent, her laughter. But also I was in the back of a taxi with her once and she tipped the driver £20. And I said, Liz, that's a huge amount of money. She said, spread the love, kid, spread the love.
Over the years, she was Lady Mayoress of Leeds and received an MBE for her charity work. But for millions, Liz Dawn would only ever be Vera Duckworth. She and Jack in their stone-clad palace of No. 9 Coronation Street, the essence of what made the show work. Struggles that everyone could relate to, and lots of laughs.
Nobody will dispute that.
Are you trying to be funny, what?
Our Vera. David Silito reporting ITV, who makes Corrie Street, described Liz Dawn as a wonderful actress and a true legend. It's 27 minutes past 6. So much feedback on the issue of religious studies. In fact, the last time we covered RE, or RI, as some of you are saying, and the difference is crucial, we received similar amounts of feedback. Mike says, hi, John, I did a degree in religious studies, and I would say 100% yes, religious studies should be taught in New Zealand schools. Religious studies is the objective study of religious and cultural narratives. The churches are teaching religious education. which is the attempt to rationally justify the rationally unjustifiable and is the opposite of religious studies. Thank you, Mike. Stephen says, surely teaching children the Ten Commandments, on which Western laws are based, and the teaching of Jesus to do unto others as you would have them do to you, and love your neighbour as yourself, and live in peace with everybody, as well as the reasons why Christmas and Easter were introduced, should be taught in more schools rather than less. Andrew cites all the religions we need to know about, including humanist atheism, and says that it's good to have a knowledge of all of them, from Christianity to Islam and the whole lot. That, Andrew, also would be RE, right, religious education. And Professor Steve Truick has sent us a long, sorry Steve if I said your name wrong, Truick, has sent us a long email, and I'm going to try to read as much of it as possible before 6:30 because it's making a point that lots of you have made. John, it's very good to hear this getting airtime at last. Many parents have struggled with the issue through the years, and the Ministry of Education has not wanted to be open and clear about the situation. We discovered our kids were being given RE by an itinerant Christian Bible group. When we asked that our kids were not made to do this, they and others ended up sitting in the school foyer quietly, overseen by secretarial staff. The school would initially not accept there was an issue, and even when we offered to give up time to supervise kids to do fun stuff outdoors, the principal forbade it, arguing we were not qualified. This mystified us, as the Bible group were not qualified teachers either. We raised our concerns that the so-called RE class was really an RI, religious instruction, focused entirely on Bible stories and doctrine. We asked that at the very least an RE and ethics program could be useful to help all children know about cultural diversity and tolerance, but this was refused. Finally, we had to go to the Human Rights Commission, who mediated and we finally got some satisfaction. The school subsequently made it clear to new parents what was happening and offering the ability to opt out. We still believe that as this is not school, children should opt in. The school was required to provide equivalent activities and input for children doing RE. Thank you so much, Steve, and all of you for your feedback. We love hearing from you, and we love having you out there. We hope to see you, speak to you, and hear from you again tomorrow night from 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The county's Manukau DHB is planning to offer some staff, including all clinicians, voluntary redundancy. The New Zealand First Leader, Winston Peters, says no decision will be made on a coalition until after special votes are counted by October the 7th. A 29-year-old man who was seen on CCTV near to where a man's body was found in Western Springs is now talking to the police. Officials in Puerto Rico say they're facing a major humanitarian crisis in the wake of Hurricane Maria, and an 8-year-old girl cyclist has been killed after being hit by a truck in Inglewood. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Visit rnz.co.nz for trusted news from New Zealand, the Pacific and the world, with coverage of latest sports, business and rural news, plus video, opinion and commentary to keep you up to date with important